I used to keep count of the nights she turned away from me. Not aloud, not even consciously, but somewhere deep in my mind, there was a quiet record of every time I reached out and she murmured, "I'm tired." It began as something harmless, an innocent excuse after a long day, but over time, it became a wall I couldn't climb. My name's Daniel. I'm 39, married to Claire for 12 years. We weren't always like this. There was a time she'd fall asleep in my arms, when we'd talk until dawn about nothing at all, when laughter filled our nights like music. But that version of us vanished somewhere, between deadlines, obligations, and the silent routines that replaced tenderness. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't attractive anymore. Maybe I'd lost my touch. I started working out, buying new clothes, cooking dinner, even lighting candles like we used to. I thought effort could revive what was barely breathing. But each time I tried, she'd give that same weary smile and whisper, "Not tonight. I'm exhausted." Exhausted. That word became a dagger wrapped in softness. The truth was, she wasn't tired for everything. She had energy for her friends, her phone, her late-night shows. Just not for me. Not for us. One evening I asked gently, "Claire, are we okay?" She sighed, not the kind that carries emotion, but one of those tired, dismissive breaths that tell you the conversation's already over. "Daniel, not this. Again. You always make a big deal out of nothing." Nothing. That word hurt more than rejection. Because when someone you love treats your loneliness like an exaggeration, it eats you alive from within. I stopped asking after that. Pretended it didn't bother me. Pretended I was fine sleeping beside someone who felt more like a stranger than a wife. I buried myself in work, came home late, ate dinner in silence while she scrolled through her phone, the blue light dancing across her face. I told myself, maybe this is marriage. Maybe people just outgrow that early passion and settle into calm companionship. But this didn't feel like companionship. It felt like being invisible in my own home. Then came the night everything changed. A Thursday. Rain outside, steady and soft, tapping against the windows. I walked into the bedroom, same routine. She was already in bed, phone in hand. I sat at the edge, watching her, and realized I couldn't even remember the last time she looked at me with love. "Claire," I said quietly, "can we talk?" She didn't look up. "About what?" "About us." A pause, then a sigh. "Daniel, not tonight. Please. I'm sleepy." That was it. Something inside me broke, not with anger, but with clarity, like a fog lifting. I nodded, stood, and said, "Okay." She didn't ask what I meant, just turned over and said, "Good night." I walked into the living room and sat there for a long time, listening to the rain, the ticking clock, the low hum of the refrigerator. The thing about silence is, it's deafening when you realize it's all that's left between two people. The next morning, I didn't wake her. I packed a small bag. Nothing dramatic, just essentials. A few shirts, my laptop, a toothbrush. I didn't leave a note. I didn't want to explain what should have been obvious. When she called later that afternoon, her tone was casual, even annoyed. "You left early. Where are you?" "At peace," I said softly, for the first time in years. There was silence, then her defensive tone. "You're being ridiculous, Daniel. You always overreact." Maybe I did. Maybe I overreacted too. Years of being ignored, of feeling unwanted, of being the only one keeping something alive that she'd already buried. That night, I booked a cabin 2 hours from town. Quiet, secluded, peaceful. For once, I wanted to breathe without asking for space that should have been freely given. As I watched the city lights fade in the rearview mirror, I Understood something. Love doesn't die in a moment. It fades slowly, through whispers, through I'm sleepy. That night I stopped counting. The cabin sat beside a small lake, surrounded by pines that swayed when the wind passed through. It wasn't fancy, but it was calm. Calm without the weight of someone's indifference beside me. The first few nights were strange. I'd reach out, instinctively, expecting her warmth, but there was only cool air and rustling sheets. For years, I believed that being beside someone, even without connection, was better than being alone. But watching the sunrise melt through the fog, I realized loneliness in peace feels better than loneliness in company. On the third day, Claire texted me, "You've made your point. Come home." I stared at the message for a while. There was no apology, no worry, just control, like she still thought I existed to orbit her moods. I didn't reply. By the fifth day, she called. I ignored the first 2 times, then answered the third. "Daniel, this is childish," she said. "You can't just disappear because you didn't get your way." "My way?" I repeated quietly. "Claire, I wasn't asking for a vacation or a gift. I was asking for you, for us." She sighed. "This is what I mean, you're always so dramatic. Every couple goes through dry spells." "Dry spells don't last for years," I said. "And love doesn't survive on excuses." There was silence. Then she asked sharply, "So what? You're leaving me over sex?" I gave a humorless laugh. "No, Claire. I'm leaving because somewhere along the way you stopped seeing me. You stopped hearing me. I stopped being your husband and became an inconvenience." Before she could respond, I hung up. Not in anger, but in acceptance. That night, under the stars, I thought about how love doesn't vanish all at once. It unravels, thread by thread, until you're holding nothing and wondering when it all fell apart. I'd spent years clutching those threads, trying to weave them back together. But some fabric can't be mended. Days turned into weeks. I found a small job in town, simple work that kept me busy. The locals were kind, curious, but respectful. I told them little, only that I needed a change. One evening, an older man named Tom, who ran the hardware store, sat beside me on the pier. "City life wears people down," he said. "You look like someone who finally stopped running in circles." I smiled faintly. "Something like that." He nodded. "When you beg too long for someone to see you, you start fading yourself. Good thing you stopped before you disappeared completely." His words stayed with me. A month later, Claire sent one last message. Just a few lines. I didn't realize how far apart we'd grown. Maybe we both stopped trying. "I'm sorry, Daniel." For the first time in years, her words felt honest. But apologies don't always mean return. Some things can't be rebuilt, not from pride, but because peace, once found, is fragile. And I wasn't ready to lose mine again. I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, then turned it face down on the table. The phone buzzed once more, then fell silent. As months passed, the ache began to fade. Not completely, it never does, but it softened into something bearable. I learned to cook for one, to read without watching the clock, to sleep without waiting for movement beside me. Sometimes I still thought of her, her laughter in the early years, the way she looked on our wedding day. Not with bitterness, but with quiet gratitude. She was a chapter of my life, one that taught me the difference between being loved and being kept. Now, when people ask if I'm lonely, I tell them the truth. No. I was lonely when I begged for crumbs of affection from someone who'd already let go. Out here, in the stillness, I'm not lonely. I'm alone. And that's different because being alone means you still have yourself. And that's something I almost lost trying to hold on to someone who'd already walked away. That was the last lesson she ever taught me. And maybe, in a strange way, it was the most important one.